Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Wednesday, December 10th, 2025. We are here this afternoon for a work session, and our discussion item is the Information Technology Portfolio Project Management Office Services Overview. That's a mouthful. I'm Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me is my fellow Commissioner, John Kafalis, and Commissioner Shattuck McNally should be joining us shortly. We have our County Manager, Lorinda Volker. Lots of great folks here around the table, but I will turn things over to Mark Pfaffinger, our Support Services Director and Chief Information Officer.
Thank you for the opportunity to meet today. Again, I'm Mark Pfaffinger, Support Services Director and CIO. We're here to highlight the county's IT portfolio services work and the structured, transparent approach that we've used to support every department in Larimer County. Over the past several years, many years actually, Larimer County IT has built a mature, disciplined portfolio management model, one that's delivered dozens of projects with clear prioritization, strong governance, and consistent execution and outcomes. Our intake and roadmap processes create realistic expectations, align work to county goals, and ensures resources are used where they provide the greatest value. This approach has made Larimer County a leader in Colorado. Many organizations look at our model as an example of how to manage rising demand, complex technology needs, and cross-departmental projects effectively. Today we'll give you an overview of how the process works and the value it provides to our organization. We've been at this for a while, and I think we've got a pretty mature process that we're really excited to share with you today. So I'll hand it over to our team, and they'll introduce themselves as they speak to their section during the meeting today.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cassie Lullick. I'm the Portfolio Services Director within the IT department here at the county. Thanks for having us today. I just want to start by describing a little bit about the Portfolio Services team. I really like to tell people to think about the team and the services we provide. If you look at the county of a network of roads, each department has its own path, full of ideas and projects. Without guidance, some paths, might get blocked, might get diverted in the wrong direction, might, need to slow down or maybe even stop. It can be hard to know which projects are moving slow or which ones might need some help. So that's where the portfolio services and the PMO team come in. We act as the county's navigator. We really give a clear view of all IT projects and really help departments find their path forward. We partner with departments to understand their goals and turn them into actionable projects. We plan, track, and provide roadmaps so everyone knows what will be done, when, and in what order. In short, we bridge strategy and execution, turning ideas into organized, achievable work, so county projects don't just start, they succeed efficiently and deliver real impact.
Okay, so this process has been in the works for a while. So we've been maturing over the last 5 years. The Project Management Office has delivered over 88 projects to the county. We've navigated many versions of prioritization. We've really homed that in through the IT Steering Committee. And through that time, the commissioners, thank you very much, have provided additional funding sources to help fund projects that come in from the department level to sort of even the playing field, to give every department that has a good idea to improve services to the residents of Larimer County a fair opportunity to compete for resources within the organization. And so that's really been a great process. One of the biggest advantages is with that increasing demand and increasing ideas, especially through that period of COVID, we'll discuss in more detail the process that we take to bring projects through the intake process, to review ideas, to estimate those, to look at technology matches. And in a lot of cases, I think the biggest success we have is to not do things when they don't pan out, when they don't look like they're going to deliver the value, or the technical or the department or the IT resources don't align well for success. We can have those conversations before we get too far down the road. A lot of these processes were born out of failure. We had a number of large projects at the county, mostly driven at departmental levels, where the commissioners funded fairly large efforts, and they ended up kind of going a little sideways. And so through that process, we came back to the board about 7 years ago and made a request. Let's put some money into a component enterprise replacement plan for, primarily at that time, was to deal with large enterprise software that needed to be replaced in departments, like a finance system or departmental ERP or the CAD system at the sheriff. But we put some stipulations around the use of that money. In order to get access to that funding for enterprise replacements, there had to be a full life cycle approach to doing a project to increase the chance of success, to make sure the money was being used in a way of good stewardship. And so really what you're hearing today is the result of that initial meeting and yes from the commissioners to set us forth on a path to build a structure to improve our chances of success. And so I'm going to let them kind of go through the process that's kind of been baked over the last 4 or 5 years that really shows how we've matured this process.
And Mark, I'll add here, well-intentioned leaders would often serve as the project manager, but department heads are really good at what they do, not so great at technology projects. And so having that gap became really obvious when some big projects came forward. They ended up being fine because IT was brought in and they found the resources to help the projects go forward. But people don't get into the business they're in to install software. They get into the business to be able to do what they do. And so having a team of experts who can really keep us on track and ask the right questions has really paid off. And this is a great story to tell. I think this is a real good example of being a good steward of county resources, people time, dollars, all of it, not having to redo things. So yeah, thank you for bringing this forward today.
Great. So we wanted to share just more of real life example. This is actually our active portfolio dashboard. This is available on the B-Board site for anyone to access at any time. And it displays all of the active projects that we have currently going on. It shares their overall health. That's where the kind of the color wheel is, green on track, yellow maybe a little bit of risk, and then red might be off track. And then gray is if there is a project on hold for some reason. It also highlights what phase the project is in. And then scrolling down, hopefully I don't go too fast, it also highlights all of the projects individually with some key data points. You can also click on the project dashboard individually, and this will display that individual project dashboard. So more details regarding that project, what they're working on, status updates, budget information, and project timelines, key things that are important to stakeholders. For transparency and communication, these are included in the status reports that the project managers send out on a biweekly basis. And also for transparency and communication, we display the portfolio dashboard within IT every other week and have collaborative discussions around what's going on and maybe where support may be needed. These are the services and teams that make up the PMO. So we have portfolio management, intake and prioritization, project management, business relationship management, business analysis, and organizational change management. It's really one team that works together to work on a consistent discipline of standard processes, and we really work together throughout the entire project lifecycle.
All right, I'm Kelly Hayworth. I'm a portfolio services supervisor. I supervise a group of business analysts within our PMO working area. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about our project intake process. I'll talk to you high level about what that is, what the value it is that it brings to our organization, and then dive in a little bit about some of our high level processes about how we actually accomplish some of our intake efforts. So to kick us off, the best way to visualize our project intake, where we're taking ideas all the way to the prioritization process, is as a funnel. So we're getting a lot of ideas up top, and then we filter out those ideas into some of our general buckets of category of work. of our project work, and then efforts that may not actually meet our project definition as well. All of the projects that are within our portfolio go through an intake process. This is really important and essential because it helps us identify which of those ideas are meeting some of our strategic objectives, helps what it's actually going to provide value to our organization, and align with the work that needs to be done. It helps promote some transparency within all of the different departments, again, so it helps provide a level playing field. It's a repeatable process that people know what to expect at this point as well. It also creates a clear way to evaluate requests as well. So everything's going through the same criteria as well to be evaluated against. Through intake, in general, we document what the request is. We have a high-level scope at that point, and we have an understanding of what needs to happen, the components of the system, the functions of a system, what we're looking at actually solving as well. And that helps us identify and plan out resources as well. So we're, again, very high level at this point. There's a little bit of just providing that initial estimation and estimation of time, resources, and also funding at this point. I like to think about this, I'm a gardener, so I like to think about this from a gardening analogy. So when you go to the store, sometimes you're met with a whole bunch of seeds that you can choose from. Those are all of our ideas that we can pick from. But you select your seeds based on where you want to plant them, how much sunlight they're going to get, what the soil type is. Those are your requirements that we're looking at. Those are kind of the general functions that we're looking at. Then we're going to plant those seeds based on timing of season. So I'm not going to plant my tomato seeds in May or in April, right? I'm going to wait until probably June to plant those. So that's about timing. Those are the timing that we want to plant those resources. And then finally, we're going to weed out some of those seeds that we don't want to plant. So not everything becomes a project as well. So that's kind of the best analogy that I can think of to kind of describe what we're doing here. So if we want to go to the next slide. Why is this important? So some of the benefits of this. So our intake process is pretty unique to Larimer County. And I think there's a couple of different benefits that we'll talk through. So I think one of the biggest benefits is that it provides realistic expectation across all parties. So we have realistic expectations from our IT side as also from our department side as well. So we kind of know what they need and want, again, those requirements that are happening, what problems they're trying to solve, what capability they need to do. And then we also talk from the IT side, what is feasible and what's not feasible as well. So that's all going to lead to gaining some efficiency and really ensuring that we're focusing on value. So at the end of intake, again, we want an accurate estimation of time, an accurate estimation of the resources, and those are all driven by collaborative conversations. So a great example of this, again, I'm speaking a little bit about requirements, so high-level requirements, but a good example of that is each department at the end of intake will come up with some requirement. They'll also go through the exercise of prioritizing that requirement. So really simple, low, medium, and high. So at the same time as we solution it, IT is providing a complexity ranking, high, medium, and low. And a great example of this is a department can have a low ranking requirement. It's really, they could live without that within the software system. But then IT might rank that as a high complexity. Those mismatch of priorities helps facilitate conversations about if we really need that, what the value that requirement might be providing, and then also provide some transparency in that conversation too, about what the true need is of that, and then also what the complexity from the IT side is. All of that is going to increase our coordination. So it helps facilitate, once it actually gets to a project, who needs to be involved, what the resources are, and what the level of coordination and complexity around that software solution would be. If we want to go into the next slide. So
I'm kind of guilty of this where I have a good idea and I'm like, it sounds easy in my head. And I'm like, we should just go do that thing. And of course, my staff know now to put me through intake. And through that process, they come back and they show me some things that I didn't realize, some mismatches in our infrastructure or some capabilities that we don't have. And, at first it feels a little bit like someone's throwing water on your great idea. But through the collaborative conversations, what usually emerges is alternative approaches, other ways to solve it. Maybe we already have a technology existing that the department didn't know about that we can match them up with. A lot of intake is learning more about the business needs so we can align it to what our capabilities are. So it's kind of a very good back and forth process. And the team has been trained over a number of years on how to really do this effectively, so.
Yeah, so great segue. So how we actually do this. So again, I talked a little bit about a repeatable process, and I think that's one of the best benefits of intake. So every intake generally follows this process. So it's going to start with an initial meeting. So the department is putting in that request. We have this great idea. We want to vet this out. The business analyst team generally goes and speaks to them and says, what are your goals and your vision? What problem are you trying to solve? What does that look like? What does your process look like? What is the true inherent need right now? We take that and we start to kind of run with it a little bit. So then we start to ask some questions to identify what those requirements are, what the functions are, what the components are of those processes. And then we start to, at the end of that, prioritize those requirements. So at the end of intake, we have a list of requirements, and then the department provides their priorities as well. From there, I talked a little bit about this. The IT team internally is then reviewing those. So the IT team, to Mark's point, then has all the information about what they want to accomplish, what their goals are, what the use case is associated with that, so that we can better solution that as well. So we're able to look at what those high-level requirements are, if it needs to be a vendor solution, if it needs to be a custom development solution. We have all that information to start to kind of point to resources that would need to be available in order to accomplish that solution. The important thing that I want to check in about too really quickly here is that throughout this process, we're constantly checking, does this meet our project definition? So is it time-bound? Is it complex? Is it risky? Those are types of things that are driving our project definition. So at any point, we can decide, yes, this meets our project definition, or no, this is going to be not so complex. We can just run with it. So there's two paths forward. If it does meet our project definition, we're prioritizing it, and we're getting it onto our portfolio backlog at that point. Or if it's not, we can work it in several other ways as well. So the point here that I think is really important to take home is that at the end of intake, we're getting a clearly defined need. We know that this is an issue. We know that it's a vetted out idea. We have alignment with our project definition, and we have an estimation of that level of effort. So those are the kind of three qualities of intake. Once we're done, those are the things that we have accomplished.
Commissioner Cafalas has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. What is your first name?
Kelly.
Kelly. I forgot my hearing aids, so if you all could talk into the mic, that would be helpful. My question, and I see in the presentation you'll give examples of specific projects later, but I'm wondering in this process here, can you give a case example of, of an actual thing that you guys had to deal with, like an introduction of an idea of what? I mean, can you actually give an example and walk us through this with a real life example, or will you be doing that later?
Do you all want to wait to go through it, or do you want to answer that now?
And it can wait if you have it. It just helps me to have specific examples.
I believe we have an example of the
Okay.
the boards and commissions app, but if you'd like us to give a little idea of the,
Okay.
that was an interesting road
Yeah.
to project, and I think we could stop here and give a little bit of a feel what that was like for BAs to go through the intake on that.
And that would be a wonderful example, but I would offer a suggestion. Let's wait towards the end to make sure we have proper time to have that conversation.
Okay. You want to table that for now then?
What's
We'll get
that?
back to it.
Yeah.
We'll table that and we'll get back to that? Okay.
Table
If
time.
he doesn't get enough information. Any questions, Commissioner? Okay, I had a question, just a question with the prioritization. So obviously, there's some things that are more urgent than others, whether it's like a state mandate kind of thing. Does that, I mean, that obviously factors into how you do that. Like, we may be, all of a sudden, the state may be like, in the next 6 months, you need to be able to do whatever. And then, does that, I mean, then other things take a back seat to getting that kind of required project done?
Yeah. And I would say that's a real scenario that comes up within the prioritization process. And we'll talk a little bit about ITSC, which is the governance committee, and that tends to be one of their criteria that they look at.
Some areas like systems, a good example is the treasurer system. We see a lot of statute changes in the tax collection area. We actually have a slightly different process where we've dedicated resources every month to prioritize enhancements to their software. So some of those requirements actually go through a slightly different process to get prioritized. If it's a new idea or a replacement of an existing system, then it goes through more of an intake. If it's an existing product that we're just maintaining with small enhancements, we have a more formal process with the department on a monthly cadence to review those changing needs and redirect resources.
Thank
But
you.
a good example is if the treasurer wanted to buy a system or build a system. And so that's how this comes into play. Sometimes we go to a conference, we see really cool stuff displayed, and we come back and we say, we want that product. It turns out we really don't want that product. We want something that product does, but maybe that product doesn't do everything we need, and it doesn't connect with the systems we already have here at the county. And so slowing down, because we used to come in and try to plug a product in, this really helps decide and helps me decide. I don't think I do want that. I saw this really cool demo, but it turns out I saw only the cool parts. I didn't see the parts that don't work so well, that these folks know more about. And oftentimes, we'll end up building something. We talked about the lowest system, the treasurer system, because there isn't something out there that does what we need to do. And there's risk in that too. So that's where this gets balanced. It really is it's more of an art than a science, and it does change every time the ITSC meets because priorities change all the time.
Well, yeah, and I imagine that there's a lot of cases where you've maybe built something and then, like, for the treasurers, like, there's a new, they have to add something because there's a new state requirement, right? And so you probably see a lot. Does that still go through this process, like something that's just an add-on kind of thing?
If it's a small enhancement, like a change in statute that needs to change the data model and update a report or how taxes are allocated, we have dedicated resources that support the treasurer system that work with the department product owner, usually in the treasurer's department, to tell us what their priorities are for those small changes to the system. If we have to replace the whole system or rewrite the platform, then it does go through the intake process. So we are rewriting the treasurer system right now. That's a project on the backlog that's being tracked with project management and resources assigned to it. In parallel to while we're developing that, we're also experiencing changes in laws, and we're going back to the operations and maintenance team to make small adjustments to the old system while we're writing the new system. So there is a lot of interplay between the teams and a lot of discussions between the project managers and the product owners to go, hey, we need to delay your project because we have to go put some effort into this emergency. And so that's all about communication and transparency that the project managers have with the departments and the teams to make sure we're making good choices.
Question, please.
Thank you for explaining that. Commissioner Cavallis.
Yeah, thank you. Just to build on that conversation, what is the typical time frame for this portfolio intake process, and how nimble is it? I think you suggested that it is nimble. If we have a statutory change that requires something to happen in 3 months, I think that's in part what the Commissioner Stevens was getting at. How do you adapt to that and that sort of thing?
It really varies. So it varies based on complexity, but oftentimes if we know that something's prioritized and is urgent, we'll move it through pretty quickly. I think a good example of this is an upcoming LINK project, which is the data sharing effort with Community Justice Alternative. There was some grant funding that we knew they needed to access, and so we pushed that intake within maybe less than 4 weeks. I think it was pretty quick. And we got that onto the backlog for our governance committee to review as well. And so if there is a regulation or some driving force that requires an expedited, we can manage that.
And when it's not urgent or a need for expedition, what is the typical time frame for this process?
It can vary based on complexity. So if something's
Well, of
pretty
course,
simple
yeah.
and the idea is well-baked, they have a good understanding, it could go pretty quickly. It could be through a
Okay.
month. If something is more complex, there's not a clear owner, we don't quite know
sense.
who owns it or what the background around it is, it could take a little bit longer to vet out.
I think if it's a well thought out idea and it's fairly well understood and we have the resources, within 3 months, we should have the intake process pretty well tightened up. But we've had intakes that take over a year because things get put on hold or the ideas change and we have to go kind of start over. Or we've had things, like we said, within a few weeks, within a month, we've had things ready to go. So it is a little bit hard to answer that question because we get a lot of different levels of ideas at different stages of well thought out or not.
And to add to that a little bit too, is some of the intake efforts require coordination with multiple departments, which then can add to that complexity and that timeline. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Moving on, this is a good segue into the number of different intakes that we've seen over the past 5 years. And so I think this illustrates why intake can be important, as well as this discussion and questions that we've been addressing too. So over the past 5 years, we have had 125 different ideas come through intake. Here's a little bit of breakdown of some of those different paths that intake can follow. So of those 125, 34 are going through our capital portfolio. So it's still going through this repeatable process that we just talked about, vetting out the idea, the kind of complexity associated with it, and that's being moved to one particular portfolio that we manage as well.
I could take this. So any enterprise software that runs the business, like the big software that is critical to the operations of that department, such as the finance platform or the sheriff's CAD and RMS system or the treasurer platform, they're really critical to the business of the department. Those are managed through we have a roadmap of replacements and upgrades to those systems on an enterprise capital replacement plan. And so we try to make sure we don't do two really big projects at the same time, but we almost always have one or two of those in our portfolio at any given time. And so that's what the capital is made up from. The ITSC projects are more of the new ideas that are coming out, small departmental ideas or improvements, and they tend to be things that weren't as well thought out or planned out in advance or not critical necessarily to the core operations of a department.
Thank you. So moving on, 8 of those projects end up being combined. And I think this is really interesting. So we can have a couple of different ideas that come through at different times around our intake process. And they could be even from different departments. But after evaluating those ideas, we might see some similarities between those two. And so this helps gain some efficiency because then instead of doing 2 separate projects, we can execute one project and identify if one solution fits multiple needs as well. And so this number I think is really interesting to kind of talk a little bit about this. As Mark mentioned, 26 of those are going to our ITSC portfolio, which is our governance portfolio. Those tend to be some of those new ideas that require some initial vetting around as well. 32 of those don't actually become projects. And I think this is actually a good thing, as Mark claps a little bit, because there's a couple of reasons why something might not become a project. And to give you a couple examples of why. So maybe the timing isn't right. We go through this intake process and we see the solution. Maybe the department doesn't have the resources to implement at that time. Maybe it's not their priority. Maybe it doesn't align with their strategic roadmap or their strategy at that moment, and they just want to wait. They'll bring that idea in at a later time, so we can see the same idea sometimes come through, depending on timing. I think that gains some efficiency as well. So that's one of the reasons why that could be a good thing.
And Kelly, I think one of the really good things about this process is departments don't always understand how many of resources they will have to put toward a project. So they think they have an idea and IT will just sort of implement it, but it turns out you do need some experts on your side to really be engaged, but maybe it's a clerk and recorder idea and it's in the elections area and it's September. Obviously, they're not going to want to do anything till after the election closes, and so maybe it comes back in the spring when they have more time to devote toward a project. So sometimes it's realization of the resources it takes on the customer side as well.
Mm-hmm. And then there's another number up here that I think is really interesting too. So 25 of those are going to what we call our team backlogs. So these are ideas that came through that we're in close alignment with some of the IT services that we maybe already offer, and they're small, they're not heavy lifts, they're not complex, and we can just work that without a project. And so there's some value and benefit gained from there because those teams know what they're getting. They can work that really quickly, they have the requirements, and they have a handoff there. And so there's a lot of value in that because we don't necessarily need to execute a project as well. We could just hand it off and work that request. I think the thing about this too that I want to highlight is it's, when we go back to our original slide, so there's that funnel, it's not just about filtering, it's also about directing to the right time and the right place and identifying the right process as well for execution too. And I think these numbers kind of paint that picture as well.
I will add, probably about 15 years ago, our general approach to ideas that came into IT was to start working them. And so that 32 would normally turn into something going a little sideways at somewhere along the road. So our goal is to really start executing things with resources when we're pretty sure it's a good idea. It has department commitments for their resources, our IT resources align, and that we have a better chance of success. So when I see that number of how many projects we didn't start, I think it's our most important metric.
And then this is just to visualize what this actually means. So this is a glimpse into the work and how we manage our IT intake requests right now. So this is a glimpse into the board. We very simply move this across the cards across the board essentially. And again, this is providing some transparency into our IT team as well, so they can start to think about what's coming down as well. And then it also provides some transparency to the department and to our governance committee. So you can see we have 13 ideas right now. We haven't started those initial meetings yet. And then once we move through the process, it follows that repeatable and consistent process as well.
All right, apologize. So this leans into the IT Governance Steering Committee, also known as ITSC. So the ITSC committee is responsible for prioritizing IT project requests. They have an objective ranking process and really a structured review and voting process. The committee is consistent of a representative of each service category, along with the county manager and Mark Pfaffinger, the CIO. Those committee members really help provide insights and information as they're ranking and voting, and along with the prioritization of those projects. When evaluating, the prioritization and governance committee looks at the benefits of the core function. Is it tied to the strategic plan? What are consequences of not doing that project? Is the department ready? Are there probability of success? Is it compatible with existing IT resources? And so they really ensure these alignments and these key considerations when they're ranking and voting. Josh Fudge is the chair of this committee, and so he really helps guide the committee, be transparent, helping them make those strategic decisions, and really help them focus on those county impactful initiatives. So.
One of the great discussions in that committee meeting is I'm going to use the purchasing system as an example. Heather McMillan represents a service category, and she actually was a customer who needed a piece of software developed for her, and recognized that other things, other priorities, continued to bump hers down, knowing that one day this improvement would be made, but it wasn't critical to her business. It would have made it more efficient and better, and it certainly is in place now and is great. But we have candid discussions in this group about what's good for the entire organization, not just for my service area or my department, but really how do we all benefit so that we can fairly use our resources. This, we've had several committees over the years try to do this. Always money was tied to it. Who came with money to do a project went first. This discussion really talks about the need and the benefit to the community, what is required by statute, what will make our lives easier, what will make customers' lives easier, and not who comes in with money or a grant or something like that. So it really is about the service. I think that's the real value. It took us about a year to design this system. You kind of go slow to go fast, one of those situations. But I haven't heard anything negative about this. Maybe lack of understanding sometimes, but not that they think it's unfair. And in fact, in response to that, Josh and Mark now come 4 times a year to department head meetings to talk about the portfolio, what's on the list, why things have shifted, just to bring more transparency and understanding to the process. So it sounds really simple as we talk about it, but it is very unique to Larimer County and to our culture. I'm not sure it would fit everywhere, but it certainly has helped us.
You guys like stories, so I'll tell you a story. We used to have a governance process many moons ago, before most anybody in this room. And the outcome of that governance process was a score. So you get like a number. And after you got your score, everyone would walk around and compare their scores to each other, and it created all kinds of drama. Why did you get a 72 and I only got a 75? And, you know, when we looked at this process, what we realized was none of that's important. All that really Cassie needs is a prioritized list from most important to least important on a backlog that she can start mapping resources to. And so we eliminated scoring completely. We do internally score in the group, but we don't advertise it. But it helps us just put it on a backlog. Then we sit back and look at it and make sure it feels right. And we actually have those real conversations in order to get, at the end of the day, a much better product.
Yes.
With no contention in terms of comparing numbers with each other.
Which leads into our portfolio roadmaps. So this is that list that Mark mentioned that we pull up in the ITSC meeting to prioritize those projects. So this is our project roadmap in prioritization order. And so we're able to move and adjust things on a routine basis to making sure that we're choosing the right projects to start at the right time. This allows me to have conversations with resource managers. Sometimes there's vendor engagements. When can a vendor start? And that determines when we can kick off a project. And it really helps with that planning and prioritization, resource management, communication. It also gives us the ability to go back to the departments and say, you were ranked number 4, we'll keep you updated. You know, these are the discussions that were had, and be able to just have that transparency and communication around that ranking.
Yeah, a good example on that ranking, you'll see a PC lifecycle reconfiguration. A lot of that's driven by things like we're starting to have security patch issues, or particular operating systems are going end of life, and that's creating problems. We needed a more improved process for that. So that's what pushes things up a little bit. Maybe there's a more of a higher risk of not doing the project. And so the ITSC provides us with the top list, and we have a different internal process to rank and map the capital improvements. So.
And this gives us that holistic view to be able to look at everything all together.
Thanks. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Sabrina Santos, Portfolio Services Supervisor, and I oversee the project management team. So I'd like to talk a little bit about IT project management, what that is, and what it is we do as IT project managers. So the slide before you has a conductor leading an orchestra, and this is really the perfect analogy for project management, because the conductor may not have written the music that's on the music stand, and they may not have hired everybody that's sitting in the orchestra, but it is their job to lead that group through the music and to make sure that every part is playing at the exact right time. And that is exactly what we do with project management. So by planning, organizing, and executing all of the tasks needed to turn a goal and make it into reality, we can then turn the idea that Kelly starts with and make it into a tangible outcome. So whether that's a new product, a new service, or even just a deliverable like a business process or new documentation, we're able to provide that to our customers. So the project manager then, as that conductor, is responsible for all aspects of the project and making sure these are all coordinated together. And this includes scope, schedule, and budget, which are the three core tenets of project management, but it also includes managing resources, managing stakeholders, communications, risk management, and procurements, which can be both contracts and vendors. So this is a lot. There are a lot of project components, and the project manager is responsible for overseeing all of them. But one really important note I'd like to make is that a project manager alone doesn't eliminate risks or guarantee a timeline will absolutely be met. They really are there to provide the management of that risk or of that timeline, for example. They establish a clear plan, a backup plan, they delegate tasks and communicate, but they don't actually eliminate that risk. And really what they're providing is the oversight to make sure that our organization can reduce costs by avoiding and minimizing those risks as much as possible. So if there's really one thing to take away from this, I would say keep in mind that the project manager is really your conductor. They're keeping everyone on track and organized. And we also send you regular status updates so that you know what's going on.
All right, so I talked a little bit about the business analyst services that could be provided during project intake, but during project implementation or execution, we also might have some business analysts or BAs that kind of show up and help support our project managers as well. And so our role within the project is to help build bridges. So whether that is between a customer or our IT department, our job is to ensure that people are connected, informed, and essentially on the same page. We do this largely through analyzing and developing what we call requirements, the needs of the software solution. So those could be high-level needs like components or features or functions, all the way to the details of when we want something to be done within a workflow or within the system configuration. We do things like visualize what those system configurations are. We help facilitate conversations, and we help facilitate decisions that need to be made in order to get those requirements as well. One of the most valuable roles that the BA might play is to be a translator on project. So we're working directly with those customers, again, those departments who are telling what the needs are, and translating those needs back to our IT teams and our project teams to ensure that everybody kind of is on the same page with those requirements. We also might, again, Sabrina mentioned this too, we might also be translating those requirements to third-party vendor solutions too. So we might be helping ensure that those vendors are meeting those requirements as well. So I told you a little bit about my love for gardening. I also like mystery novels too. So I like to think about the BA as being a detective. So they're gathering the clues, they're making sure that might be the data, the stakeholders, the processes. They're asking the questions to uncover what those details might be. They're figuring out what the symptoms are, and they're piecing together some of those evidence to make sure that we know what needs to happen as well. They're really making sure that they're working with the rest of the project team to essentially know what the system needs to do, the system being the software.
Okay, the next team is Organizational Change Management, which is also known as OCM. So maybe you guys have experienced this before, or maybe we can pretend where, there's been a new process, a new technology, a new change in the way of working, and everything has been just solid, on time, on budget. The new tool has been released. Go live went great. And then shortly after, you start hearing these rumblings, these frustrations. People are not liking it, or maybe not using it, or creating some sort of workaround. Well, that's the gap that OCM can fill. So they really help with that people side of change. They really work on helping that adoption. They really help people understand what's changing, why it matters, and how it impacts those people. They really support change through clear communication, effective training, and supportive adoption. OCM really helps make projects be successful long-term.
Hello, I'm Allie Whitcomb. I'm a business relationship manager within IT here at the county. So have you ever needed something from IT, but you weren't sure where to go? The Business Relationship Manager, or the BRM as it's also called, can act as that bridge, serving an important role as a point of contact between the departments and the IT organization. The BRM manages business requests and escalations. We serve as a hub for questions. We help coordinate requests with the appropriate IT teams, and we help track work progress to ensure timely resolution and make sure that departments are satisfied. The BRM can function as an escalator for high priority issues. We help keep departments informed throughout processes. And we help shape and clarify a department's needs by helping them define the problem that they're trying to solve, what their outcomes are, and what their level of urgency is. The BRM helps determine whether needs should be handled projects, enhancements, service requests, or just simple consultations. And then we translate those needs into actionable IT priorities. The role includes advising departments on available IT resources, what's possible, and what next steps should be. Additionally, the BRM is responsible for building and sustaining trusted relationships across departments and then maintaining those regular touch points with those departments. We try to foster clear and proactive communications, act as a liaison for escalations or sensitive issues, and we help share department feedback with IT leadership to support continuous improvement and stronger collaboration.
A great example of what this team does is because the BRMs are talking to the customers all the time about what do you need, what do you see coming, what's on the horizon, what is the state saying, they also hear about little pain points. So let's say that human services is having to enter name, date, serial number over and over again. It doesn't stick from one screen to another. And because of it, they can't get any more efficient than where they currently are. And they may not even think about that as a project or a problem. But Allie hears that discussion happening, and she says, I think we solved that problem with another piece of software that we had. Let me take that back to the team and see if that's something we can work on. So it's an idea that didn't even come from the department. It comes from that conversation, understanding the work, and the pain points that they feel. Something like that makes them more efficient, but a lot of these changes are much more drastic. And I know we'll talk about a couple of them here in a minute, but it could be as little as I keep having to enter this person's name 12 times before I can get to a screen. Even though I can do this in my sleep, this is the piece that's slowing me down.
Okay, so we'd like to share a couple examples of some success stories that we've had from recent projects to really highlight how exactly our services work together to create impactful solutions for our customers. So up first, we have the Sheriff's Jira Service Management Project, which refers to the implementation of Jira Service Management, or JSM as I'll refer to it, for the Sheriff's Office and bringing them onto the county's IT ticketing system. So the quote that's on the screen is directly from the Sheriff's team, where they said that this project was an example of well-meaning teams coming together and forming a bond while delivering a solution, which is such a testament to everything that they did on this project. So to give a little bit of background, originally the Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff's IT team specifically, really faced a large challenge. They did not have a formal system for managing their IT requests or incidents, and so when they were getting these requests and incidents, they didn't have a way to track them, to prioritize them, or really resolve those in a consistent way. And all of those inefficiencies were slowing down their ability to support their customers. So it was taking longer and longer. It wasn't the level of service that they wanted to provide. And so it came through our intake process. And through that PMO-led intake process, we worked with the sheriff team to identify Jira Service Management as the best solution to standardize their processes and improve their service delivery. So our PMO team also supported them through the project from end to end. We helped define those requirements that Kelly talked about. We aligned their needs with the existing JSM platform and how IT was using it, and then also guided implementation to make sure it was done at the right time and in the right way for the sheriff's office, so that they were successful in that adoption. And because this project also introduced some of those new ways of working, organizational change management was a key component for success. So all of the training, the communication, the different ways that they worked on adoption with the sheriff's office were critical to helping the users transition to the new software and even help them feel a little bit excited about it, which was one of the best parts. So overall, the result has been fantastic for both departments. We did successfully deliver the technology solution, that people side of change, and even improved relationships between the different departments. Some of the divisions between those groups as well really improved. So the sheriff's office users now have increased efficiency, transparency, and collaboration with their IT and computer services. And then computer services also has increased transparency and collaboration with county IT. So across the board, there's much better collaboration and communication across all of those groups. So that to say, all of these changes have really helped the sheriff's office meet their business goals while also improving their overall service.
Yeah, many of our IT issues don't just sit in the sheriff's office. It might be a problem in the core network or with some of our providers. And before, we were cut off from each other in terms of we had to make phone calls or use chat to go back and forth. Now we can tag each other in tickets and actually share content and updating in a book of record. And if it needs to get escalated to a problem or we have to do major changes within our environment, they're also a part of that communication channel. And so it's dramatically improved the way that we pass information between us and how we share just the general overall responsibility to provide good uptime and quality services to the sheriff department within their IT needs. So this was a pretty cool project, and many years in the discussion, and I think through the business analysis process and finally aligning the sheriff's needs and realizing it mapped pretty closely to what IT had already developed, it really created a really quick path forward for us. I will say change management was fun too. If you ever were over there, you saw the cups on there. Did you ever see? They had all these little like tumblers with the QR codes on them in order to submit tickets. They're all over the place at the sheriff's office. And so if anyone forgets how to put a ticket in, they just have to look at their nearest mug that might be near them.
All right, the next success story that we wanted to share with you guys, this quote comes from Jared in the clerk and recorder's office. The clerk's office has received a lot of positive feedback from community members, CBOE referees, and the assessor's office regarding the process change and application, even with a near record volume for CBOE this year. Over 40% of the appeals were submitted and scheduled online. The spatialist application allowed all of the evidence and records to be collected and retained electronically, increasing the availability for the assessor's office and decreasing the manual workload for the clerk's office. So this project was the County Board of Equalization. We called it the CBOE project. So an example of how, to kind of go through the framework that Kelly mentioned, is they came to us, the PMO, with a problem. They said there's this manual and labor-intensive process in order to do this. It's impacting the community, it's impacting the staff. It's just not sustainable. What are our options? So Kelly's team worked through intake, did some vendor demos, drafted their requirements, helped them select a vendor that met those requirements. And then it went through ITSC when they established those requirements, what that project was. When we prioritized that project, they also had an aggressive timeline in order to meet that 2025 CBOE. So we made sure that we encountered that when we were resourcing and kicking off that project. And we were able to meet this aggressive timeline because of the intake process and the collaboration and the requirements. Everything was vetted and done so well up front that we were able to work with the vendor and successfully implement this tool for them. This result was a digital solution with a public-facing online portal, so residents can now submit their materials electronically and track the appeal on real life terms now. And not only did it help the clerk and recorder no longer have this manual process, they're able to do things much more efficient and transparent, creating a better resident experience.
It was really fun for a while going into the clerk's office because I felt like I was a hero and I didn't do anything. They were just so, it improved their processes so much. It was just changed the way, it was so manual before and a nightmare that, the implementation of this was just huge for their department. It allowed them to focus on their core business and not get pulled away for what they believed, kind of this other side project that they had to do every year. So it was neat to watch it happen.
And this is just a screenshot of the application so that you guys can have an idea of the look and feel. And then an appeals dashboard we thought would be interesting to share with you, because if you look at that high dip, that shows that 2,000 citizens used this. So.
Okay, next up that we're going to talk through is the boards and commissions application, which I think you guys are all familiar with. The quote here is, "A user-friendly system that can generate reports that help the Board of County Commissioners do their daily work, where the status of each applicant is easily determined." So the Board of County Commissioners and staff were managing applications for boards and commissions through a manual, fragmented process. It required duplicate data entry, made reporting difficult, and created challenges for staff, applicants, and you, the commissioners. The office turned to the PMO for support. So through our intake process, we evaluated multiple off-the-shelf systems, but none of those really met all of the requirements that we had. So after a thorough review, we decided to do a custom-developed solution. The PMO partnered with the Commissioner's Office and staff to define the requirements, guide the development team, ensuring the new system met the county's needs, and then they worked through design sessions to map out what the new process looked like, testing sessions to validate the functionality, make sure it worked the way it was supposed to, and then training sessions to help prepare staff for when the system launched. So the new system now eliminates duplicate data entry. It empowers Commissioner's Office staff to manage and update the systems independently, provides robust reporting, and streamlines communication between applicants, staff liaison, selection committees, and commissioners. The successful project developed a tool that goes beyond just basic functionality. It improves operational efficiencies, it increases transparency, and strengthens the overall experience for applicants and staff alike. And then this is just a picture as well of what the system looks like.
Commissioner Shannon McNally.
I just have to comment that this has been phenomenal and just so helpful, and just really taken a lot of, I think, capacity reduced for our staff, because it was a lot to try to manage this with so many systems, and then I tend to interview everybody, and so trying to get those all scheduled and it's really been nice to be able to track how many terms have they done, and I know we're working on what was their first choice, whatever, but it's been really a game changer for me to kind of reduce time for trying to understand and just have that all available as I'm kind of going through there, and I just want to thank you all, because any half hour I can get back during the day is monumental. So just really hope that it's been tremendous help for me. So thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think one thing you'll see too, when you do these kinds of projects, it forces really committing to what your business rules are. Because when you have a manual process, they can be a little bit squishy. And so when you programmatically put it in a system, it really creates that discussion that the business analysts have to really tighten up and decide what's going to work for specific departments. So this is an example where I think now the staff and hopefully the commissioners have a better idea of what the rules are, how many, we actually define some of that within the software, which was really an interesting process to watch them go through.
Yeah, I think I was probably one of the people that made it squishy, because I didn't understand the last, so I would constantly be going to staff and saying, can you get me those applications? Where do I find those right? And I will say, as Commissioner Shattuck McNally said, every second is precious. I mean, sometimes we have back-to-back meetings for 10, 12 hours in a day. So it's really to learn any new software or to learn a process that's not logical or it seems to have some bumps is really, that's, and I'm sure there's hundreds of people in our staff that also have that same experience, right? We're not the only ones, but, so I would just, so I would subvert the former process and be like, can you send me those again? Can you send me those applications? I can't find those applications. Where are those applications? And so I'm probably the classic example of someone who, but I have made myself learn this process. It's quite easy. I never lose an application now. I never miss an email on it because it's, it's just all there for us. And so really has improved me, and I'm sure it's improved my relationship with staff who were like, Kristen's asking for those applications again. So really, I mean, it was pretty remarkable. And I can't imagine there would be an off-the-shelf to a certain extent because, I mean, it's a pretty, I guess municipalities and counties would have a system, but
Well,
I
the
don't know
pain
that
was
anybody-
felt so clearly that we could find a system that maybe met 60% of our needs. But an example was it might have done the board's management okay, but it didn't provide any communication to applicants. And that process alone is very time-consuming to email and get information back. And by putting that in one platform, like you said, we don't lose those communications. We're making sure people know where they stand in the process. And without an end-to-end review of the total process, not just 50% of it, we're able to deliver a system that meets more of the needs and provides a better experience for folks that are interacting with us. So that's the part I'm most proud of. Like, if you're coming and do an application, it's a much cleaner experience for someone who's applying now.
That's great. So hear that, public, apply for boards and commissions. We need you. Commissioner, any questions or comments?
We're at the end of your presentation.
Yes, this is the last slide.
I do have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Well, one question that I should know the answer, but maybe I've forgotten, and that is the project management services that you all provide the way you've described, and I think this is amazing and great. Do the departments pay for these services?
There's a couple ways that this is primarily funded. The commissioners have set aside money into the ITSC fund. I think it's 400.
I don't remember
Okay.
the amount. I'm
You've
sorry.
set aside enough, we think, to meet our backlog requirements. And what happens is the project team actually bills against, they track their time and they track their resources against the projects that the ITSC has decided to do. And that helps fund that portion of their work. So when we said the money isn't in the IT department and it's not in the business, it's sitting in the middle. So anyone can compete for those resources. And basically, the money then pays for the PM, BAs, and change managers that it requires to do the processes. Those are also come out of the capital project fund also. So we move money from the capital projects to the operating budget in order to pay for those projects as well. So there's no direct billing to departments in general. It's all done through these two other funding mechanisms. The only time where we typically will bill externally is if there's grant funds involved.
The reason we track it that way is to understand what did a project actually cost to complete. So it's not just the software you purchased or the time it was to build the software, but it's these other support mechanisms that are important as well.
May I continue with my just a couple more,
Go ahead.
or I can pause? Thank you for that answer. Thank you for the example of our favorite piece of software, the dashboard for boards and commissions. I'm wondering, in terms of evaluation of how well this is working, do we track, are we able to determine cost savings, actually money saved, and other resources saved, such as staff time, things of that nature? I mean, by doing this over a year's time, it makes a tremendous amount of sense. Can we say that we've saved the county or the taxpayers $1 million because we're more efficient and we're really looking at these projects in a good way, in a collaborative way? Any thoughts on that one?
This is certainly a challenging area to track.
Okay.
We tend to look in terms of value and not dollars saved. Some projects come forth and they're able to document staff time resource savings. But most of the time, those resources then get redirected to other priorities or other needs because we're a very lean organization. So we typically don't see resources being given back, but it enhances efficiency, I would say, is the most, probably 90% of the projects are dramatically improving efficiency. So the resources can direct to other priorities that the department needs them to be working on. Do you have any other answers for that?
Well, I think you could say the 34 projects that never were projects, that's the savings historically, but how we put a number on that, I don't know. What did we prevent by having an intake process? We did, 15 years ago, we did a lot of projects that were 1 or 2 year use case, and then departments stopped using it because it didn't actually meet their need. So when Mark became CIO, that's one of his goals, was to say, what are we doing wrong? How is this happening? And a lot of it was happening in a vacuum, in a silo. Based on the best information that leader had at the time, they felt like this piece of software would really help. Now they understand, I think, because of this team approach, it isn't software that solves a problem, it's people that use the software that solve the problem. And so when you take people out of the equation, it's just a piece of software. And so I think that's why we're seeing our things have longer life now. We're really looking end to end, a lot of planning at the beginning. Do we need to replace this tool? When does that happen? What will that look like? Why would we need to do that? Would a law change? Would it just age out? Would it be a security, kind of a back-end thing? They're tracking all of that right now. So it really is hard to say what the dollar amount was that was saved, but certainly as an efficient organization, we have a lot happier customers because they're getting what they need. They may not get it the day they need it. They may get it 6 months later because of the backlog, but they know it's coming and they understand where they fit. So I think in that case, it's kind of like any other prevention tool. It's hard to say what you prevented, but you can look back at the history and say, well, we didn't do that again. And I think we can say that.
Thank you. I have a few more, but I can pause to see if the two of you or perhaps Lorinda have questions.
Commissioner Shredick McNally?
Thank you. Ally, Cassie, Mark, Sabrina, and Kelly, I just want to thank you and commend you. I'm just sitting here and I'm just like, wow, really interesting resource mapping and conversations and just love, I'm kind of one of those people who likes to come up with these ideas and like, oh, let's do this. And then it just sounds like it's really great that you can vet them, basically, it sounds like. And I really appreciate that very much. So I have a couple of questions. I see the smart resource use. When you talk about resources, and I was thinking sometimes maybe smart resource use, but maybe it's also, so my question is it might take a lot of resources, but it meets a really important need. So I was thinking like the GIS project for the sheriff with the wildfire. When there's a wildfire, they needed that GIS so they know where all the resources were and the critical infrastructure and where certain mitigation was done and how that all kind of layered together. So it might have been a little more complicated, but it was a tool that was needed for the next wildfire, which we always hope it's not soon. But I'm wondering, when you talk about smart resource use, how do you balance that with, I know you talked about that earlier, but there's sometimes a greater need that might, as you said, cost, that quotient you talked about, complexity, but also kind of that need. And so how do you quantify that when you have just public safety involved?
So we've been tuning the ITSC rankings for a number of years. I'd say the problem we had initially was public safety always was number one. But when we looked at the overall value to the residents, it was a little harder the way we had the ranking structured tended to put too much emphasis on things like public safety often has a chance of ranking highly because they touch a lot of those trigger points that are county government. And so we don't want that to be completely diluted, but we also want to give other departments a reasonably fair shake at getting resources. And so we've been tuning that for a couple of years now, and I think we've hit a pretty nice balance of balancing public safety or citizen risk issues with government efficiency and day-to-day statutory required things that the county does. And so the best answer I have is our ranking and prioritization is sensitive to that, and we tend to push back a little bit sometimes when life and limb is over-pitched within a solution. And so, but at the same time, they generally get quite a bit of the resources because it is the nature of the business that we do.
Okay. If I could ask one more for now. So if you, back to this kind of innovation, I see a lot of innovation here, which is, I absolutely love this. It's something I always look for. How can we do this differently? So can you give me an example of an unusual aha that you all had recently that was an innovation that maybe was really out of the box, that really was aha, why didn't we think about this before? Or just something kind of that came out of this was, because we had the innovation awards, and I know we give a lot of those projects, but I'm also, maybe there's some other stories we don't hear about that I'm wondering about, that maybe you all did or some another department. What would be a very unique aha or innovation that was, even if it's tiny or big, it was something really special?
I love the ideas that are combined, personally, because I think those are the small areas of opportunity to innovate. And so I think a good example of this one is actually on our project backlog right now, Cora and records request. Those came in as two separate ideas initially, but when you think about the functionality and the business process related to those two items, they're almost exactly the same. You get a request, you compile something, you manage that request, you review it, and then you release it. And so I think there's a lot of value or innovation given when departments are willing to combine those efforts. And I think it speaks largely to those departments that are willing to collaborate and to say, hey, we can actually use one system. So I think that is a really good example of something. I really like those ones that actually end up being combined, because I think it's those small pieces of innovation that speak really loudly to the rest of the organization.
I feel like it's the nature of our business, so it's hard for me to pick one. But for instance, yesterday we were in a design session around the idea. There's a lot of love-hate to our annual performance evaluation process. Some staff freak out going into the room, even though they're going to get a good evaluation. And there's a lot of time that it takes to prepare and get all the documentation together. We're trying to shift more to a regular touch points with employees and documenting those regular interactions, so it's more of a ongoing conversation about their job. And so the idea that was kicked out was, why don't we take all the inputs, like I should be able to speak into a speaker and just talk about the employee for 15 minutes, like off the top of my head, load up their annual, journal entries of all the touch points I've had, put in our value statements from our department, feed an engine all this information, and it could spit out a draft performance evaluation for me that I would then human in the middle review and tune and add some of my own flavor to, that could dramatically change how much time we spend on the process. So those ideas are starting to come out quite a bit now with that's where generative AI is really very strong, as long as you're containing the information that it's leveraging and you're not using all the information available in the ether. You're avoiding hallucinations and things. You can get a lot of value out of platforms like that. So there are a lot of those ideas starting to emerge right now, and it's going to be a challenge keeping up with them.
Thank you. I appreciate those examples. Kind of warms my heart. Thanks.
Yeah.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, not right now.
Okay, Commissioner Capalos, keep going. I'm good. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll just offer two more questions, and then if we have time, some closing comments. Let's see. In terms of the IT Governance Steering Committee, you gave the overview, and my question is, if a department submits a project and you have a team that reviews it and there are criteria, and you determine it doesn't meet the criteria, therefore it doesn't necessarily, it's one of those, what did you call it? No.
Lower ranking.
Well, there were 32.
So the 32s actually never made it to the ranking process.
Okay.
So it has to get to a point where everyone agrees it's a good idea, a good project in order to go to ranking.
Well, I guess my question then is, does the department or the initiator of the idea have the opportunity to appeal a decision if you all determine it,
Yeah, so generally, so to clarify,
please? Thanks.
And maybe you can add anything, Kelly, that I miss. The business analyst intake process doesn't kill projects. The sponsors do. So the business owners generally realize, and sometimes it takes a conversation from myself and others to nudge them along, but generally they come to a realization that that project should either go on hold or probably isn't worth doing. And so, at least in the intake process, we're not heavy-handed about it. We don't make any determinations about value at that point. When it gets to the ITSC and they review the projects and they go through their ranking criteria and it ends up on a list of priorities, like 1 to 10 backlog, they do have a process that they can bring additional data to the ITSC if they feel like their prioritization was missed. It's called an escalation process. We invite them to the meeting at the next meeting, and they basically share with us what we may have missed in the application that they provided. And then the board, after they leave the room, the board meets and discusses whether they want to re-rank that project.
Thank you. Then I'll offer my last question, and that is this just another example of Larimer County, as Commissioner Shattuck McNally often says, the Larimer County way? Is this unique to our county government? Do other counties do it? For example, I can't help thinking about the state, and as long as I can remember, it's cost an awful lot of money to update for example, the CBMS system, the Colorado Benefits Management System, which I know Commissioner Stevens has become more familiar with. I mean, this kind of oversight, overview, guidance, it seems like every level of government, municipal, county, state, et cetera, well, certainly the federal government, are others doing this? And if not, is this an opportunity for us to export this process and maybe sell it?
You're on a group that talks about this stuff.
Do you follow what I'm asking, folks? I mean,
Yeah.
makes total sense.
We're trying to be humble about this at the same time.
Well, but forget the humble. Are others doing it? And if not, my goodness.
Very few are doing it as well as we are. If anybody, maybe City County, Denver has some element of what we do, but we are the envy of most cities and counties in Colorado.
We are definitely a leader. There's a Colorado government IT group that meets on a regular basis that actually has a project management user group. And I would say they look to us for a lot of guidance and, what are some templates you're using? I feel like we provide a lot of value to those meetings by showcasing what we're doing here at Larimer County.
Forgive me, is there an intentional effort on the part of us to export this idea so it's actually implemented, applied in other jurisdictions?
We haven't actually done anything formal like that, Commissioner
Okay.
Kafalis, but
Okay.
we're involved with quite a few groups. I'm in a national IT association. I've shared our IT governance process probably a half a dozen to a dozen times to those organizations who are looking for a governance process. And I usually say, the biggest risk with governance is to overdo it, to over-bureaucratize it. And we've done a really good job of keeping it very agile. Kelly champions projects. It's her baby until ITSC ranks it. And so she has it in this nice wrapper ready to go, and she won't let go of it until the handoff happens and it's on the board and she knows it's got a position on the ranking board. And so you get that kind of attachment to the projects when you work with the departments and you get to understand their pain points. And so I think the thing that really I'd like to highlight is the human aspect of this process is really what makes it work well. We embed ourselves in the business and become part of the business in order to make these projects successful. That's something a little bit unique about Larimer County. We are fairly collaborative across very diverse business areas. And that's something we're pretty proud of, that we've been able to work those kinds of relationships. I can say when I started X number of years ago, I won't tell you how long I've been doing this, it wasn't quite that good. And it's been a long road, 12 years of work to try to get it to where we are today.
Thank you very much. And referencing Kelly, holding on to things, it's kind of going back to the gardening analogy. It's kind of like when it's time to transplant your tomato plants, put them out in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some counties don't have the resources or don't have as many folks in IT and are really reliant on, sort of off-the-shelf products and just managing those. I mean, is that your experience?
That's definitely a strategy. A lot of cities tend to be more packaged software based. I think our approach, my feeling is what happens typically is if it's not done centrally with talented professional resources that are trained in the areas that each one of these areas we're talking about is a professional sleeve that you can advance your career in. There's certifications, there's associations supporting them. So these are actual professional tracks that they're on. If in most other organizations, they attempt to serve these roles within the department from whoever's around. Like you look like an IT guy, you should do the project. And it's really hard to be successful when you're not trained and really become proficient in these complex areas of governance that we're talking about. And so that's something that we've done differently. So instead of the department having to source their resources and make it look like the project's inexpensive, they end up providing resources to the project that don't do it very well, and they end up not doing it as efficiently as we can.
But your comment about small counties is right on. I mean, small organizations, sometimes the manager's also driving the snowplow. So, I mean, there are organizations that are really tiny. And one of the great things about Mark and his team is they will go visit, they will allow people to come and look, they'll open up whatever we have to make it easy for other folks to replicate. Nothing is secret. We don't do anything that's special. Nothing is trademarked. We're willing to share with everybody and do with anyone who wants to. I make the offer and I offer their time a lot because I think we do a really good job.
Well, thank you all. I mean, I've been serving on the Trails Mod board for 5 years. I don't know if you know about Trails Mod, but it's in Human Services. It is updating the software for child protection. We met every 3 weeks for a long time. I would say it's a labor of love. I'm not sure, I will love when the project is complete, because it's important for our staff to have that, working. But man, I have a whole new appreciation for what it's like to manage a project and see a project through. And that was a project that was started even before I came on by a private company who wasn't able to, make it happen. And so the state IT folks inherited this lump of coding that was like, here, some of this stuff's done and some of the stuff's not done. Just thank you for being logical and having a process that's understandable and that works for our, because I think having that in-house expertise and being able to create our own software that fits our needs and that's nimble enough to switch when we have, when we have state statutes that change things and somebody else wants different information or a different way of doing things. So, and thank you for walking us through this process. I think it's really fascinating how you do that, and I appreciate all the work. Did you want to make some comments?
Wow, thank you. I really appreciate this work session today. There's a lot of magic. Like this morning I talked about electing commissioners and all the things you all do that maybe, I've talked to a lot of employees this morning about at the breakfast or holiday breakfast. For those who are listening in, about the magic, the secret sauce of our wonderful county is our people. And so I really appreciate you talking about the people aspect, because you can have all the money and all the toys, but if you don't have the right people in the right places doing the right things at the right time, which sounds like what you're trying to do, then, it doesn't quite work. I've seen it happen in other counties. They have all this money to play with, but they don't have a plan and they don't have a process. They just kind of throw it at the issue, and it's not going to happen, in my opinion. And that's one thing I've grown to really deeply appreciate, is that people aspect and how you bring that all together. And I really appreciate when you talked about, their pain points. So maybe they can't articulate what they need fixed. They can just tell you what the problem is. And then and so I love that strategic partnership and collaboration, bringing folks who maybe look at a problem or a challenge in all different sides, and maybe there's something that pops out that is something someone had ever thought of before, and that might be the pathway forward. So I just want to commend you all for just a tremendous job, and I love the teamwork and the collaboration here. It's just really special, and I just thank you, because I don't always think we get to see this. You're behind the scenes, but I'm sure there's probably more than we know, ways that you impact our lives here in work, and I just thank you for that, because I can see it's really great that people have passions and love and do this stuff. And some people love to make trails, and some people like to do this, and some people like to, do behavioral health. I mean, it's what a wonderful world we live in, that people have these special talents and passions to be able to do this, to make our whole community better and stronger and more resilient. So thank you, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes, well, thank you is certainly in order, so we'll put a bunch of exclamation points on that. I also want to express my appreciation. A question that I had was around, I mean, clearly this helps with coordination within departments, but it also, I think the reference was made to when there are projects or ideas that have some similarities, it appears that it also can facilitate coordination between departments or offices. So there's a good amount of transferability. So I appreciate understanding that better. Oh, and then I guess in closing, I will say from this list of ideas, I'm glad that we have a service empathy initiative. And perhaps someday you'll tell us what that is, but it sounds like a good thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Empathy, I think empathy is our secret sauce in our organization. We really do care when we see a pain point or a staff person struggling with a system or a problem. We connect on a personal level so we can really better understand it. And even beyond that, we understand how, if we can understand how that impacts our residents, then it creates a real problem that our staff can really sink their teeth into. And I think that's when we make the best solutions.
So empathy is embedded in the process, Commissioner. I didn't say answer. Lorenda, you want to, any last words?
I think as we talk about support services, these are the unseen things the county does, right? The things we do for our internal customers who serve the customers who are the residents. Mostly, that's true. And so kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit, letting you see how the work gets done, that it really is thoughtful, that it is empathetic, that we are driven to the answer instead of telling them what the solution should be, really collaborating, working with the customer, understanding the pain points. And this is a complex process, but it works, and it works because of the people and the people who care. So thanks for giving us the time to pull back the curtain about support services in this particular aspect of it. I think it can be really dull until you really hear how much people care, and it's not just a software or a tool. It is about something that people will use every day.
Thank you, Lorenda. Very true. Commissioner?
Just real quick, I had pulled out the boards and commissions because I'm actually doing some interviews in a minute, and I see I have a new app there, Larimer County Data Exchange or something, so I might need some help. I'm like, oh, this is new, where did this come from? So I'm like, how do you use this? So I'm looking for who I can talk to later. Contact me later about how I can learn how to manage that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all again. We really appreciate it. And in pulling back the curtain, I think we all learned a lot. And I find it fascinating. And I would hope that we employ, the logic and the smooth process through all our processes. We could all benefit from that. So with that, it is 2:59 and we're adjourned. Thank you all.